Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking into the life of Waraqa Bint Abdullah.
Oh yeah, she's a fascinating figure.
Really is. She was known as the martyr even before her death.
Wow. Okay, so let's dive into that. What makes your story so unique?
Well, for starters, she really embodies the spirit of early Islam.
Mm.
But her story is more than just piety. It's also about privilege.
Okay, privilege. How so?
Well, think about Medina back then, during the time of the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah, I can imagine resources were scarce, right?
Right. Literacy was uncommon, and, societal expectations really limited women's roles.
Definitely. So where does Waraka fit into all of this?
Um, Roca inherited a ton of wealth, which gave her freedoms that most people couldn't even dream of.
Ah, I see. That makes sense. Freedom to study the Quran, I imagine.
Exactly, and to dedicate her life to scholarship in a way that was almost unheard of at the time.
That's incredible, especially for a woman in that era. So her wealth really set her apart.
Absolutely. It allowed her to, kind of break free from those societal norms and contribute to the Muslim community in a really profound way.
It makes you wonder, though, was she an outlier? Were there other wealthy individuals who also kind of challenged those conventions?
That's a really great question. And, it kind of speaks to the heart of why Waraka's story is so important. Because while there were certainly other wealthy individuals in Medina,
Yeah.
her commitment to scholarship, particularly as a woman, really makes her stand out.
It kind of sheds light on a side of early Islam we don't often hear about.
Totally. And it makes you think about like the intersection of wealth and faith.
Yeah. And how those things could empower individuals to, push boundaries and contribute to the community.
And her dedication to the Quran, it wasn't just a casual thing. She became one of the few people, and an even rarer woman, to memorize the entire Quran.
A Hafidha. That must have been incredibly difficult.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really solidified her position as a leading scholar. People in Medina would actually walk by her house at night and hear her reciting verses.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. So her home became a place of learning.
It did. It became a hub for women,
Yeah.
seeking to learn and understand the Quran.
That's amazing. It really challenges our understanding of, the roles women played in spreading knowledge.
Exactly. And it's that desire to actively participate in the community that leads us to another really interesting part of her story,
Oh, okay. What's that?
her involvement in leading prayer.
Ah, right. I remember reading about this. The Prophet Muhammad instructed Warqa to lead the people of her household in prayer.
hmm And it's something that scholars have debated for centuries because, some argue that it means she led mixed gender prayer.
Right. While others believe it was more likely she was leading the women of her household.
Right. And it's really fascinating because the original narration is actually kind of ambiguous.
That makes sense. So it's open to interpretation.
It is. And it kind of, raises these questions about the boundaries of women's roles in religious practice back then.
Absolutely. And it challenges us to consider the historical context. Traditionally, Islamic scholarship has held that men typically lead congregational prayers.
Right. Especially when men and women are praying together.
Right. So, Waraka's situation, even with the ambiguity surrounding it, really sparks debate.
It forces us to rethink our understanding of gender roles, how they were navigated.
Absolutely. And what's so great about this debate is that it makes Waraka's story so relevant even today because it's a conversation that's still ongoing.
It is. And it forces us to look beyond our assumptions and consider that the roles of women in early Islam were maybe more complex than we think.
Way more nuanced.
Exactly. And speaking of complexity, there's another layer to her story that adds even more depth.
Oh, what's that?
Her yearning for martyrdom.
Wow. Okay. So she wanted to be a martyr.
She did. It shows that her desire to contribute to the Muslim community wasn't limited to, like, scholarship and teaching.
So are we talking about her request to join the Battle of Badr?
Yes, that's right. A really pivotal moment in early Islamic history.
It's incredible to think she was willing to risk her life on the battlefield.
She even offered to simply tend to the wounded.
Oh, wow.
There's this really powerful quote where she says, I want Allah to grant me shahada, even if it's just there to treat the sick amongst you. But I want to be there in the battlefield with you.
Powerful stuff. It speaks to her unwavering belief.
It does. It speaks to her willingness to sacrifice for something bigger than herself.
And what was the Prophet Muhammad's response to that?
He actually assured her that she would achieve martyrdom.
Really? But not on the battlefield.
Exactly. He knew she wouldn't die in battle. And that's what led to her being known as, the martyr or Shahida
Well, she was still alive.
while she was still alive.
Hmm.
It was incredibly uncommon to be recognized as a martyr before death.
It really makes you wonder why he made that prophecy. What significance did that hold within the community?
I think that's a perfect place to pause.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive into the impact of this prophecy and the tragic events that ultimately led to the fulfillment of Waraqa's destiny as the martyr. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our deep dive into the incredible life of Waraqa bint Abdullah. Before the break, we were talking about the Prophet Muhammad's prophecy that Waraqa would become a martyr even though he knew she wouldn't die on a battlefield.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff.
It really is.
To be recognized as a martyr, a shahida, while still living,
Yeah.
it speaks volumes about her piety.
It really does. And also the weight the Prophet's words carried in the community.
For sure.
I mean, imagine living with that knowledge, knowing that your fate was sealed, but not knowing, like, the circumstances.
Yeah, it's awe-inspiring, but
Yeah.
also a little bit daunting, I'd imagine.
Right. How do you go about your daily life?
Right.
Knowing your ultimate destiny.
It really speaks to her character, though, doesn't it? That Waraqa didn't retreat in fear or become obsessed with the prophecy.
Yeah.
She just continued her life of devotion, scholarship, teaching.
Yeah.
It's like she just had this unwavering commitment to her faith.
Uh-huh.
And that even in the face of her predestined fate.
It's incredibly moving.
It is.
And knowing how her story ends,
Yeah.
it makes the circumstances of her death even more tragic.
It does. It really does. Waraqa's life ended in such a stark contrast
Yeah.
to the peace and devotion that she lived.
Yeah.
It's actually the thing that allowed her the freedom to pursue her passions.
Her wealth.
Her wealth, yeah.
Right.
It ultimately led to her demise.
It's hard to believe that someone who dedicated her life to serving others
I know.
could meet such a violent end.
Mhm.
Can you tell us more about what happened?
Sure. So remember, Waraqa was quite elderly at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and she had two servants, a man and a woman, and they helped her with, daily tasks.
Uh-huh.
But sadly, their greed overtook their sense of loyalty. They saw Waraqa's wealth
Yeah.
and her vulnerability as an opportunity.
That's just heartbreaking.
It is.
The betrayal of trust, the violence.
It's senseless.
Can you talk about the discovery of her murder?
Yeah. So it was actually Umar ibn al-Khattab,
Okay.
a close companion of the Prophet and a future caliph.
Hmm.
He was accustomed to hearing Waraqa's nightly recitations of the Quran.
Oh, wow.
So one night, that sound was absent.
I can't even imagine that feeling of unease, that sudden silence.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
That silence was so unusual, so out of place that Umar decided to investigate.
Oh, wow.
And his search led him to Waraqa's house,
Yeah.
where he made the tragic discovery that she had been murdered
By her servant.
by her servant.
What a devastating discovery. I mean,
It really was.
it must have really rocked the community. How did they respond?
They were understandably shaken, but amidst the grief and outrage,
There was also a sense of acceptance.
right.
The Prophet's prophecy has come to pass. Umar, known for his justice, took immediate action
Yeah.
and ensured that those responsible were held accountable.
So despite the tragedy, justice was served.
It
A
was.
small comfort, but an important one.
Absolutely, yeah. It speaks to the core principles of the early Muslim community,
Right.
that even in the face of grief
Uh-huh.
and shock,
Mm-hmm.
justice prevailed.
What about Waraqa's legacy? How is she remembered beyond her tragic death?
That's where her story, I think, becomes more than just an individual story.
Okay.
It's a powerful reminder of the impact one person can have.
Yeah.
Because despite the brutality of her death,
Right.
her life continues to resonate.
Mm-hmm.
Not as a tale of tragedy, but as this testament to the power of faith,
Mhm.
scholarship, and knowledge,
Mm.
her dedication to memorizing and teaching the Quran,
Yeah.
her unwavering belief.
Right.
These are the things that truly define her. It really challenges us to rethink the roles women played in early Islam.
Exactly. I mean, here was a woman who defied those societal expectations, embraced scholarship, and became a leader in the transmission of the Quran.
It's a reminder that history is more complex than we think,
Yeah. And we need to dig deeper, look beyond the surface.
and uncover those hidden stories.
Exactly.
The unsung heroes
Yeah.
and the individuals who challenge the status quo.
Waraqa's story leaves us with this sense of inspiration and sorrow.
It does.
Her life was this testament to faith and scholarship,
Uh-huh.
while her death serves as this stark reminder of the fragility of life
Yeah.
and the enduring human capacity for both good and evil.
All right, listeners, we've explored the tragic end of Waraqa's life and how that prophecy labeling her the martyr came true.
We have.
But her story doesn't end there. In part 3 of our deep dive, we'll delve into her enduring legacy
We will.
and how her story continues to inspire us today. Welcome back, everyone, to our deep dive into the remarkable life of Waraqa bint Abdullah. We've journeyed through her early life, her unwavering faith, and her tragic death. But now, let's shift our focus to her legacy. Expert speaker, what makes Waraqa's story so enduring, even centuries after her death?
You know, it's interesting because her story isn't just confined to history books. It challenges us to think differently about women in early Islam.
I'm really curious to hear more about that. What are some ways her story has shaped these perceptions?
Well, think about her mastery of the Quran. She wasn't memorizing it just for herself. She was teaching it,
Right.
correcting recitations, being a guardian of this sacred text. It challenges the idea that women's roles were only domestic.
It definitely does. She was a scholar, respected for her knowledge,
Exact.
sought out for guidance.
And then there's that ongoing debate about her leading prayer in her household.
Right.
Regardless of how you interpret it, the fact that the Prophet Muhammad instructed her to lead prayer at all, that's significant. It prompts us to ask deeper questions.
About women's roles in religious practice, leadership within early Islam.
Exactly.
So, Waraqa's story is a catalyst for these ongoing conversations
It is.
about gender roles, scholarship, leadership within the Muslim community.
It's not just a historical account. It's a dynamic force shaping our understanding.
What about her piety? How does that contribute to her lasting impact?
Her devotion, her yearning for martyrdom, her dedication to prayer, these qualities resonate with people across time.
It speaks to a human desire to connect with something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And for Waraqa, her faith was intertwined with her intellectual pursuits,
Right.
showing that those two things aren't necessarily in conflict.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what is the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember about Waraqa?
I think it's the power of challenging assumptions. Don't let preconceived notions limit your understanding of history.
That's such an important message.
Dig deeper, ask questions, be open to new perspectives.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the life of Waraqa bint Abdullah.
We have.
We hope her story inspires you to challenge assumptions, embrace knowledge, and seek a deeper understanding of the world around you. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Until next time.